constitutionally protected speech, as was documented during the Biden administration. It says a consent decree signed off by a judge and filed Wednesday in the Texas federal court will force the State Department to, it says, no longer throttle online engagement or seek to fact-check American media for exercising their First Amendment rights, with exceptions for obscenity, incitement to imminent violence, or speech integral to criminal conduct. It says the decree will remain in effect until January 31st, 2036, and it says, and also mandate trainings for state employees and grantees to make them aware of their free speech protection obligation, because if you work for the federal government, you're held by the Constitution, which thereby allows for extremely broad freedom of speech, by the way. It says the new Civil Liberties Alliance brought the suit in December 2023 against the Biden administration on behalf of the Daily Wire, the Federalist, and other journalists who had their views suppressed on the COVID-19 pandemic, elections, voting issues, abortion,
me too.
and sexuality, and transgenderism. What was actually happening, right? So this is complicated right now because, you know, Trump is being accused of also going after journalists right now. If you read a lot of the mainstream media right now, the argument, they're saying Donald Trump is, you know, his administration is censoring journalists, going after them, kicking them out of the Pentagon, and so on like that. Meanwhile, Republicans are saying, look, when, you know, Biden was in office, we were being censored and attacked and deplatformed and demonetized and everything else. It's kind of complicated. Let me explain the discrepancy, okay? So President Donald Trump is accusing a lot of left-wing journalists of doing things like spreading fake news around, you know, for example, the whole Russiagate scandal, lying about what was, you know, of course, a fake dossier, which was actually falsified. The whole thing has kind of come out now. Communications behind the scenes, leaking false information, as we've seen with the Pentagon. They get whistleblowers, and oftentimes they leak false claims. Sometimes they leak unverified information that oftentimes doesn't be, if not false, debatable, right? But that is the way journalism works, to be clear. Not everything has to be absolute, but, you know, normally there's steps we take to, you know, say, hey, this is a claim from one anonymous source. I tried to verify it. I could not verify it, or there were other claims. You know, the things that normally are steps you take. The argument for the Trump administration is that a lot of the news outlets that he's going after are just doing hit piece journalism. It is the sad reality of modern investigative journalism that more often than not it's used as more of a political tool. It's people trying to use what I would call, you know, kind of political terrorism against people. They're destroying their competitors, going after other media outlets. They're destroying, for example, key targets within politics because they don't want somebody to run for office. They want this guy to run for office. They want to pull down this piece. They want to go after this guy, and so on like that. While you have media right now saying they're being censored, you know, the story at the Pentagon, for example, is the Pentagon made new rules that journalists can't just wander around the Pentagon and get backdoor, like, leaks from people. They kind of put guardrails up, stay in the briefing room, and that's where you go. A lot of them took that as being such an issue because it eliminates a lot of their ability to get information through, like, backdoor sources, which results, of course, in information being leaked, which is of national security concerns, especially during times of war. They're saying that is enough of an issue where, you know, that amounts to censorship. The other side of this is what constitutes actual journalism, because I would say that while a lot of the mainstream press right now is calling that censorship, what else is happening? In California right now, you have the Nick Shirley Act being voted on. Is anyone heard of this? The Nick Shirley Act, where an independent journalist, you know, young guy, going out and, you know, doing investigations into fraud. He's basically going out asking people questions. He's the guy who exposed, for example, rampant fraud in Minneapolis, now exposing rampant fraud in California. In California, the government right now, the local government, they're trying to actually criminalize, by passing a bill, they're trying to criminalize that type of investigative reporting with the Nick Shirley Act. That, I would say, is actual censorship. preventing actual, what I would call real investigative journalism. Now in California, they'd say the reason they're doing that is because it's overstepped the boundaries of normal investigative journalism to become more of a type of racial harassment. People are targeting, for example, daycare centers on the basis of race and assuming that people are committing fraud if they're from Somalia or another country because, well, they showed it here, so it must be true everywhere. And they say it's resulting in people harassing daycare workers and things like that. Now, which side do you want to believe in? Look, you tell me. I think investigative journalism is a valuable and very important field because what it is, investigative journalism is the auditing power of the American citizen. It's the auditing power of the private citizen. A journalist is effectively hired through subscriptions, through, I guess, even just, attention and advertisers these days, by the American people. They become what they call the fourth branch of government, effectively, right? The branch that represents solely the American people. The job of the journalist is to inform the public, whereby the public can make informed decisions about purchases, voting, daily perspectives, and so on. You basically hire journalists to go and read all the reports and do all the footwork, because who has time for that? Obviously nobody does. Even I don't have time for all that, which is why we have different journalists doing different beats. You effectively hire us to collect that information for you and then present it to you. That is the role of a journalist. The investigative journalist is very important because the investigative journalist is the one who fact checks. The investigative journalist is the one who audits. The investigative journalist is the one who says, well, they say there's nothing going on here. Well, let's go see. Is there something going on here? Well, hey,
like the voter fraud in Fulton County.
That is the role of the investigative journalist. And unfortunately, through business, through politics, through jealousy, through personal finance, or even just intermedia, with what they call black propaganda, not in the racial sense, it's just the name they give for it, black propaganda, black advertising, where instead of promoting your product, you're attacking your competitors. A lot of news agencies, a lot of big media use investigative journalism to destroy their competitors, to get them demonetized. And so, back to the main point is what I was getting at here. So during the Biden administration, the type of censorship you saw was more the latter category. It was journalists, for example, myself included, frankly, who were doing investigations into COVID-19. Well, hey, where did the virus come from? Maybe it was China. If you said that, you were censored. I've been censored since then. If you talk about, hey, well, what was the real story of Jan 6? Well, if you talked about that, you were censored. Hey, what was the real story about Trump-Russia and the hoax, which turned out it was a hoax? If you talked about what is now recognized as the real story, you were attacked, censored, demonetized, labeled online by these fact checkers, by government-tied. The State Department was doing it, as they're admitting now. Government-tied censors contacting social media, shutting people down. That was actual shutting down of legitimate investigations. I have a deep problem with that. And so, yeah, I think, and the other side is now, if I would criticize that type of censorship, would I also criticize the Trump administration for going after legacy news outlets doing their investigations? Let me put it this way. I understand why the Trump administration is doing it. They're doing it because a lot of these journalists effectively act as political operatives. A lot of these journalists use the power. They abuse their powers. They destroy their competitors. They're obviously working for purely partisan
the whole
interests.
9 yards.
People, they're spreading false
The
information.
View.
Should the government censor that? I have mixed perspectives because I know how bad it gets. The Trump-Russia hoax almost resulted in the overthrow of our government, in real terms, based on false information and based on journalists lying and based on the censorship of actual journalists. Myself, I was doing investigations showing the thing was fake, which it turns out I was right. Other media outlets were effectively carrying out operations to silence people like me. And I felt, you could argue that I'm an aggrieved party within something that happened. So, take it as we will, because maybe I have a bias in this regard. But yeah, I understand why they're doing it, because the industry is so corrupt and so biased and so misused. On the other side, I say this cautiously because journalism is important, and I very much believe in the old kind of founding fathers view of free speech and journalism, which is the marketplace of ideas. We should be able to debate in the open. We should be able to have discussions in the open. There are things that are illegal if you commit libel, if you defame people, if you, for example, are working on behalf of a foreign government. Yeah, then it's different, obviously, right? There are crimes that can be committed. And I would actually argue that a lot of the fake journalists I've seen are guilty of these. If you were to take my advice, if I were to give recommendations on it, I would actually say that I believe what the federal government should do is remove some of the additional powers of for example, defaming people that media have been able to enjoy thanks to previous cases. If journalists, for example, go after a public figure, they're allowed to lie to a very strong degree. And I believe those protections should be eliminated. If I were to say, on my terms, what I would say. Because I think going after investigative powers should not be stopped. I do believe that using journalism as a tool for politics, inter-business competition, for foreign interest, those things absolutely should be illegal. And I think that the ability to publish false information in order to destroy people's reputation for personal or financial interest absolutely there should be more of an ability to sue them when they do that. That would be my take on it. On another topic, the United States is now looking to dominate the global oil market. I'll be talking more about this after a quick break.